The crowd fell silent as Rebecca Miller stood frozen at the altar, her trembling hands clutching a bouquet of prairie wildflowers that had begun to wilt in the summer heat of 1878. The wooden church in Silverdale, Colorado Territory, was filled to capacity with the town's most prominent citizens, all eyes fixed on the pale bride whose voice had abandoned her when it came time to speak her vows. "Miss Miller," prompted Reverend Thompson again, his patience wearing thin. "Do you take Jasper Hartford to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Rebecca's eyes darted frantically to her father standing in the front pew, his stern gaze boring into her. The memory of his words from that morning echoed in her mind. "You will marry Hartford or find yourself with nothing, girl. I didn't build the largest cattle operation in the territory to have it fall apart because my daughter is too stubborn to secure our family's future." Hartford, a man 20 years her senior with cold eyes and a reputation for cruelty disguised as business acumen, reached for her hand. His fingers closed around her wrist with punishing pressure that no one else could see. Rebecca tried to speak, but terror had stolen her voice. The church door creaked open, and a shaft of sunlight illuminated the aisle. Heads turned as a tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, hat in hand. "Pardon the interruption," said a deep voice, "but I believe there's something this congregation ought to know before these vows are exchanged." The man stepped into the church, dust from the trail still clinging to his worn leather boots. Lucas Vance was not a man who frequented churches or social gatherings. Most in town knew him as the quiet cowboy who'd arrived 3 years prior and worked the hardest, most dangerous jobs at neighboring ranches. His weathered face and sun-bronzed skin spoke of years under the open sky, but it was his eyes that captured Rebecca's attention, steady, clear, and fixed directly on her. "This ain't right," Lucas continued, walking slowly up the aisle. "Miss Miller doesn't wish to marry this man." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the congregation. Jasper Hartford's face contorted with rage. "This is outrageous. Who do you think you are, cowboy?" Rebecca's father rose to his feet. "Vance, you're out of line. Leave now before I have you removed." Lucas ignored them both, his eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. "Miss Miller, I've kept my peace too long, watching what's been happening to you. I've seen the bruises on your arms when you thought no one was looking. I've heard Hartford threaten you behind the general store." He took another step forward. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to say yes." Rebecca felt something break loose inside her chest, a dam crumbling after years of pressure. Hartford's grip tightened painfully on her wrist, but it no longer mattered. For the first time in her life, someone was standing up for her, seeing her not as property to be traded but as a person with her own will. "He's right," she whispered, finding her voice at last. Then louder, "He's right, I do not wish to marry this man." The church erupted in chaos. Hartford lunged for her, but Lucas was faster, stepping between them with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to dangerous situations. Rebecca's father shouted for order as women gasped and men rose from their seats. "This is madness," Hartford snarled. "Miller, control your daughter." Rebecca stepped back from the altar, her heart pounding wildly against her ribs. "No," she said, louder now. "I will not be controlled any longer, not by my father, not by you." What happened next would become legend in Silverdale. Hartford reached for the pistol hidden beneath his formal jacket, but Lucas moved with lightning speed, catching the man's wrist and twisting until the weapon clattered to the floor. With one swift motion, he subdued Hartford, forcing him to his knees. "The lady has spoken," Lucas said quietly, but in the stunned silence of the church, everyone heard him. "I suggest you accept her decision with what little dignity you have left." Sheriff Jenkins pushed through the crowd, hand on his holster. "What in tarnation is going on here?" Attempted assault, Lucas replied calmly. Mr. Hartford was reaching for his weapon in a house of God. The sheriff looked from Hartford to the fallen pistol, then to Rebecca's father, who stood pale-faced and silent. "Is this true, Miss Miller?" Rebecca straightened her shoulders, feeling stronger with each passing moment. "Yes, Sheriff, and there's more. Mr. Hartford has threatened me repeatedly. My father arranged this marriage to secure a business deal against my wishes." The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, Rebecca knew her life in Silverdale was over. Whatever came next would be on her own terms, but she had no illusions about the consequences of defying her father and humiliating Hartford in front of the entire town. "I'll be leaving now," she announced, surprising even herself with the steadiness of her voice. She handed her bouquet to a stunned bridesmaid, lifted her skirts, and walked back down the aisle without looking at anyone. At the doorway, she paused and turned back. "Mr. Vance, I owe you my gratitude, and perhaps a conversation if you're willing." Lucas nodded once, his expression unreadable. "I'll see to it that Hartford gives you no trouble, Miss Miller." 3 hours later, Rebecca sat on a bench outside the telegraph office, her wedding dress exchanged for a simple blue cotton dress borrowed from the station master's wife. Her carpetbag contained the few possessions she'd managed to collect from her room before her father had returned to the ranch. She had nowhere to go, little money, and no plan beyond the telegram she just sent to her aunt in Denver. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Lucas Vance stood before her, his tall frame blocking the late afternoon sun. "Are you all right, Miss Miller?" Rebecca managed a small smile. "I believe I will be, Mr. Vance, though I may be the first woman in Colorado Territory history to be grateful for having her wedding destroyed." Lucas removed his hat, revealing dark hair in need of a trim. "I hope you don't think I acted improperly. I couldn't stand by and watch what was happening to you." "How did you know?" she asked softly. "About Hartford, about my father's arrangements. I thought I'd hidden it so well." Lucas sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I've been working at the Triple M for 2 months now. I've seen how your father treats you, how Hartford looks at you like you're a prize mare at auction." He paused, his jaw tightening. "And I heard them discussing the terms of your marriage like it was a cattle sale, not caring that you were weeping in the garden afterward." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush with shame and anger. "You must think me a coward for not speaking up sooner." "No, madam," Lucas said firmly. "I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. Standing up against your own family, against a man like Hartford, that takes real courage." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the town went about its business, the scandal at the church already becoming fodder for gossip. "What will you do now?" Lucas finally asked. "I've telegraphed my aunt in Denver. She's always been kind to me, even when my father disapproved of her independent ways. I hope she'll take me in until I can find work." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "Denver's a good city for a fresh start. I spent some time there before coming to Silverdale." Rebecca studied him curiously. There was something about Lucas Vance that had always intrigued her during their brief encounters at the ranch, a quietness that suggested depth rather than shyness, strength without brutality. "And what brought you here, Mr. Vance, if you don't mind my asking?" A shadow crossed his face. "Running from some things, looking for others. The usual story." "Will you tell me sometime?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Someday, perhaps." His eyes met hers and something unspoken passed between them. "The stage for Denver leaves tomorrow morning. I'd be honored to escort you if you'd allow it. These roads can be dangerous for a woman traveling alone." Rebecca considered his offer. Under normal circumstances, traveling unchaperoned with a man would be unthinkable. but circumstances had long since departed from normal. "That would be very kind, Mr. Vance. I would welcome your company." The stagecoach journey to Denver began at dawn the following day. Rebecca sat beside Lucas, acutely aware of his presence as the coach lurched forward, leaving Silverdale behind. The other passengers, a traveling salesman, an elderly couple, and a young doctor heading to Denver, regarded them with curiosity, but kept their questions to themselves. As the miles passed, Rebecca found herself relaxing for the first time in months. The weight of her father's expectations, the dread of Hartford's advances all faded with each rotation of the stagecoach wheels. She stole glances at Lucas, who remained vigilant, his eyes scanning the passing landscape for any sign of trouble. "You think they'll come after us?" she asked quietly when the other passengers had dozed off during a particularly monotonous stretch of road. Lucas considered her question carefully. "Your father, no. He's too proud. He'll tell everyone you've had a fit of feminine hysteria and gone to visit relatives." Hartford. He frowned slightly. Men like him don't take public humiliation well, but he's a businessman first. Going after you would only draw more attention to what happened. "I've embarrassed my family terribly," Rebecca said, looking down at her hands. 22 years of being the dutiful daughter, and in one day, I've thrown it all away." "You didn't throw away anything worth keeping," Lucas replied, his voice gentle but firm. "A family that would sell you to a man like Hartford doesn't deserve your loyalty." When the stagecoach stopped at a way station for lunch, Lucas helped Rebecca down, his hand strong and steady around her waist. The simple touch sent an unexpected warmth through her, and she found herself wondering what it would be like to be courted by a man like Lucas Vance, a man who saw her as a person with her own mind and will. The way station was little more than a rough cabin with a cooking fire and benches, but the stew was hot and filling. Rebecca sat beside Lucas on a fallen log outside, away from the curious eyes of their fellow travelers. "Tell me something about yourself," she said. "Something true." Lucas seemed surprised by the request, but after a moment he nodded. "I grew up in Texas. My father was a rancher until the war took everything. I learned to ride before I could walk, and I've never wanted to be anything but a cowboy." He hesitated. "I had a brother. Lost him to fever when he was 16 and I was 18. That was 7 years ago now." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said softly, touched by the pain that flashed across his face. "Were you close?" "Like two halves of the same person," Lucas replied. "After he died, home didn't feel like home anymore. That's when I started drifting." Rebecca understood that feeling all too well. Since her mother's death 5 years earlier, the ranch had felt more like a prison than a home. "I always wanted to teach," she confessed. "I used to gather the ranch hands' children and hold lessons for them when my father was away on business. He put a stop to it when he found out. Said no miller would be a schoolmarm when we owned half the county." Lucas smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "I can picture that. You'd make a fine teacher." The stagecoach driver called for passengers to board, cutting their conversation short. As they settled back into their seats, Rebecca felt a new resolve forming. Denver would be her chance to become the person she wanted to be, not the ornament her father had tried to make her. The journey continued through the afternoon, the coach climbing steadily into the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. As dusk approached, the driver announced they would stop for the night at Fletcher's Roadhouse, a frequent stopover on the Denver route. Fletcher's proved to be a surprisingly comfortable establishment, with clean rooms and a dining room that smelled of fresh bread and roasted meat. Rebecca was shown to a small but tidy room, while Lucas took accommodations across the hall. Before retiring, they shared a quiet dinner, their conversation flowing more easily with each passing hour. "My Aunt Martha runs a boarding house in Denver," Rebecca explained over apple pie. "She never married, but she's built a good life for herself. My father always said she was too independent for her own good," she smiled. "I used to think that was a criticism. Now I see it was the highest compliment." Lucas nodded, his eyes warm as they met hers. "Independence suits you, Miss Miller. You've changed even since yesterday." Rebecca felt herself blush under his gaze. "Please call me Rebecca. After everything that's happened, formality seems rather unnecessary." "Rebecca," he said, as if testing the name. "Then you must call me Lucas." That night, alone in her room, Rebecca lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the roadhouse. For the first time in her life, she answered to no one. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. She thought of Lucas, just across the narrow hallway, and wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Not a business asset or a pretty ornament, but something else, something that made her feel truly seen. Morning brought clear skies and the promise of reaching Denver by nightfall. As they prepared to board the stagecoach, Lucas pulled Rebecca aside, his expression serious. "I received a message from the telegraph operator this morning," he said quietly. "Hartford left Silverdale last night, heading north. He told people he had business in Cheyenne, but—" Rebecca felt a chill despite the warm morning sun. "You think he's following us?" "I think it's a possibility we should prepare for," Lucas answered carefully. "The stage takes the most direct route to Denver. If he's traveling by private horse, he could intercept us." Rebecca straightened her shoulders. "Then we'll deal with that if it happens. I won't live in fear of that man any longer." Lucas's expression softened. "That's why I admire you, Rebecca. You have more courage than you know." The stagecoach departed with all its passengers accounted for, but an undercurrent of tension now ran beneath the journey's surface. Lucas kept his hand near his holstered pistol, his eyes constantly scanning the surrounding landscape. The driver pushed the team harder, sensing the urgency without being told the details. It was mid-afternoon when they rounded a bend in the mountain road and found their path blocked by a fallen tree. The driver cursed, pulling the team to a halt. "This wasn't here yesterday," he called back to the passengers. "Road was clear when westbound came through." Lucas was immediately alert, his hand moving to his pistol. "Everyone stay in the coach," he ordered, stepping down to examine the obstruction. Rebecca watched through the window as Lucas circled the tree, his movements cautious. She saw the moment when his posture changed, becoming taut with awareness. "It's a trap," he called to the driver. "This tree was cut, not fallen." "Get these people," a shot rang out from the rocks above the road, cutting off his words. The driver jerked backward, clutching his shoulder, as the passengers erupted in panic. Rebecca acted without thinking, grabbing the elderly woman beside her and pulling her to the floor of the coach. "Stay down," she instructed everyone, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Outside, Lucas had taken cover behind the stagecoach wheel, his pistol drawn. "Hartford," he shouted, "I know it's you. This isn't the way to handle this." Jasper Hartford's voice echoed from the rocks. "The Miller girl belongs to me, Vance. Our business arrangement was legally binding. Her father signed the contracts." Rebecca felt rage replace her fear. She moved toward the door, ignoring the protests of the other passengers. "Rebecca," Lucas hissed as she appeared in the doorway. "Get back inside." "No," she said firmly. "I'm done hiding." She raised her voice. "Mr. Hartford, I am not a head of cattle to be traded or a parcel of land to be deeded. No contract my father signed can give you ownership of me." There was a moment of stunned silence from the rocks, then Hartford's voice again, colder now. "You've been filled with dangerous ideas, girl. That will change once you're properly married." Lucas used the distraction to motion to the uninjured passengers. "When I give the signal, move everyone into those trees," he whispered, indicating a dense stand of pines off the road. "I'll keep him talking." Rebecca nodded, understanding his plan. As Lucas stepped away from the coach, deliberately drawing Hartford's attention, she helped the elderly couple and the shaken salesman toward the tree line. The young doctor stayed behind to tend to the wounded driver. "Hartford," Lucas called out, moving slowly along the road. "You're making a mistake. Even if you force her back to Silverdale, she'll never marry you now, not after this." A bullet kicked up dust near Lucas's feet. "She'll do as she's told," Hartford snarled, "and you'll be dead." Rebecca reached the trees with the other passengers, ensuring they were safely concealed before turning back toward the standoff. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw Hartford emerge from his hiding place, rifle aimed at Lucas. Lucas stood his ground, pistol steady in his hand. "It's over, Hartford. The sheriff in Silverdale already knows what you tried to do at the church. Add murder to that and you'll hang." Hartford's laugh was ugly. "In case you haven't noticed, Cowboy, there's no law out here but mine. Now throw down that gun or I'll put a bullet through you." Rebecca scanned the ground around her, desperate for something to help. Her hand closed around a sizable rock just as Hartford took another step toward Lucas. Without hesitation, she burst from the tree line, rock in hand. "Jasper Hartford," she shouted. Both men turned toward her voice. In that split second of distraction, she hurled the rock with all her strength. It struck Hartford's shoulder, throwing off his aim as he instinctively pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, and Lucas seized the opportunity, firing once with deadly accuracy. Hartford crumpled to the ground, his rifle falling beside him. Lucas rushed forward, kicking the weapon away before checking for signs of life. "He's alive," Lucas called to Rebecca, who stood frozen in place. "Shot went clean through his side. He'll live to face a judge." The aftermath unfolded in a blur of activity. The young doctor treated both the driver and Hartford, binding their wounds as best he could. Lucas and the salesman cleared the fallen tree from the road while Rebecca sat with the elderly couple, her hands still trembling from what she'd done. When the stagecoach was finally ready to continue, Hartford was secured inside, his hands bound despite his injury. The doctor agreed to watch him until they reached Denver, where the territorial marshal could take custody. Rebecca climbed into the driver's seat beside Lucas, who had taken the reins from the wounded driver. As the coach lurched forward, she finally allowed herself to process what had happened. "I could have been killed," she said quietly. "Or you could have been." Lucas glanced at her, his eyes shadowed with concern. "That was a brave thing you did, Rebecca. Foolish, but brave." "I couldn't let him hurt you," she replied simply. "Not after everything you've done for me." The remaining journey to Denver passed without incident, the mountains gradually giving way to rolling foothills and finally, the sprawling young city itself. By the time they arrived at the stagecoach depot, territorial marshals were waiting, alerted by telegraph from the last-way station. Hartford was taken into custody, his glare promising vengeance even as he was led away. Rebecca watched him go, realizing that the fear he had once inspired in her had been replaced by pity for a man so consumed by possessiveness. Aunt Martha was waiting at the depot, her face lighting up at the sight of her niece. She was a handsome woman in her 40s, dressed practically but stylishly, with the same auburn hair as Rebecca. "My dear girl," she exclaimed, embracing Rebecca tightly. "Your telegram nearly gave me heart failure, leaving a wedding at the altar. I couldn't be prouder." Rebecca laughed, feeling the last of her tension dissolve in her aunt's warm welcome. "Aunt Martha, I'd like you to meet Lucas Vance. He's the reason I found my courage." Martha assessed Lucas with shrewd eyes. "So you're the cowboy who spoke up when my niece couldn't. I've heard the story from 3 different passengers already, each version more dramatic than the last." Lucas removed his hat respectfully. "Madam, I only did what anyone should have done." "But no one else did they?" Martha replied, nodding with approval. "Well, Mr. Vance, I insist you join us for dinner. My boarding house serves the best meal in Denver, if I do say so myself." As they made their way through the bustling streets of Denver, Rebecca felt a growing sense of possibility. The city hummed with energy and opportunity, so different from the confines of Silverdale. Here, a woman could be more than someone's daughter or wife. Here, she could become herself. Martha's boarding house was a handsome 3-story building on a tree-lined street, its yard neat and welcoming. Inside, the parlor was filled with comfortable furniture and well-stocked bookshelves. "I've prepared the blue room for you, Rebecca," Martha explained, leading them upstairs. "And Mr. Vance, if you need accommodations, I have a vacant room on the 3rd floor." Lucas hesitated. "That's very kind, madam, but I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Martha said firmly. "After what you've done for my niece, a room and meals are the least I can offer. Besides, Denver can be overwhelming for newcomers. Better to have a friendly place to start." Over dinner with Martha's other boarders, 2 schoolteachers, a clerk, and an elderly jeweler, Rebecca observed Lucas carefully. He spoke little but listened attentively, his quiet dignity earning approving looks from her aunt. When the conversation turned to Rebecca's arrival in Denver, he deflected attention from his role in her escape, emphasizing instead her courage in standing up to Hartford. After the meal, Rebecca and Lucas stepped onto the front porch while Martha saw to her other boarders. The night was clear, stars brilliant above the city lights. "Will you stay in Denver?" Rebecca asked, leaning against the porch railing. Lucas looked out at the street, considering. "I hadn't planned to. I've always moved on before setting roots anywhere." "Because of your brother?" she asked gently. He nodded slowly. "Partly, and partly because I never found a place that felt right." He turned to face her, his expression open in a way she hadn't seen before. "But Denver has its attractions." Rebecca felt her heartbeat quicken. "I heard the school board is looking for teachers," she said. "Aunt Martha thinks I should apply." "You should," Lucas agreed. "You'd be excellent at it." "And what about you? What would keep a cowboy in a growing city like Denver?" Lucas took a step closer to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Maybe the same thing that brought him to a church in Silverdale when he had no business being there." Rebecca held her breath. "And what was that?" "The sight of a woman with fire in her eyes and fear in her heart," he said quietly. "A woman who deserved better than what life had given her. A woman I couldn't stop thinking about from the moment I first saw her." "Lucas," Rebecca whispered, her voice catching. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he assured her. "I know you've just escaped one man's attempt to claim you. I wouldn't presume to." Rebecca silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. "There's a world of difference between a man who tried to buy me and a man who helped me find my voice." She lowered her hand. "I'd like you to stay in Denver, Lucas, at least long enough for us to discover what might be possible between us." Lucas's smile was slow and warm. "I think that could be arranged, Miss Miller." "Rebecca," she corrected him, returning his smile. "Rebecca," he agreed, and when he offered his hand, she placed hers in it without hesitation. In the months that followed, Denver embraced Rebecca as she embraced her new life. The school board, impressed by her education and determination, offered her a position teaching the city's youngest students. She threw herself into the work with passion, finally using her mind and talents as she had always dreamed. Lucas found work with a horse trader. his skill with even the most difficult animals quickly earning him a reputation and a partnership offer. He moved from Martha's boarding house to rooms above the stables, but spent most evenings in the boarding house parlor, often reading aloud while Rebecca graded papers. They courted properly, under Martha's approving eye. Lucas took Rebecca to concerts in the park, to church socials, and on long rides into the countryside surrounding Denver. With each passing week, their understanding of each other deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect that neither had experienced before. When Hartford's trial concluded with his conviction for assault and attempted murder, Rebecca testified with a steady voice and unwavering gaze. Lucas sat in the courtroom each day, his presence a silent support that gave her strength. On a crisp autumn evening 6 months after their arrival in Denver, Lucas took Rebecca for a walk along Cherry Creek. The trees were ablaze with color, and the setting sun painted the mountains gold. "I've been thinking," Lucas said as they paused on a small footbridge, "about roots and belonging." Rebecca looked up at him, noting the nervous energy in his usually calm demeanor. "And what conclusions have you reached?" "That home isn't a place," he said softly. "It's a person. It's where you feel most yourself, most alive." He took both her hands in his. "Rebecca Miller, you're my home. These past months have been the happiest of my life, and I can't imagine a future without you in it." Rebecca's heart soared as Lucas knelt before her, still holding her hands. "I'm not a wealthy man, and I can't offer you the kind of life your father wanted for you. But I can promise to love you, respect you, and stand beside you for all the days we're given." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Rebecca's eyes, but unlike at the altar in Silverdale, these were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Lucas Vance, I will marry you." When he slipped the ring onto her finger, it fit perfectly, just as they fit together two people who had found in each other not completion, but complementation, not possession, but partnership. Their wedding, held in Martha's garden the following spring, bore no resemblance to the ceremony that had been interrupted in Silverdale. There was no fear in Rebecca's heart as she spoke her vows, no hesitation in her voice as she promised herself to Lucas. And when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was a beginning, not an ending, the first chapter of a story they would write together. 5 years later, Lucas and Rebecca Vance stood on the porch of their small ranch outside Denver, watching their 3-year-old daughter chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Rebecca leaned against her husband's shoulder, his arm secure around her waist. "You ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Speaking up that day in the church, your life might have been much simpler if you just kept riding." Lucas kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Not for a single moment," he replied. "That was the day I found my voice too." He turned her gently to face him. "And every day since has been a gift I never thought I'd have." As twilight deepened into night, they called their daughter in for supper, the little girl's laughter echoing across the land that was truly theirs. Rebecca Miller Vance, once silenced by fear, now living out loud, took her husband's hand and stepped inside, into the warmth of the home they had built together, word by word, day by day, and love by love.